And just I remember this kid walking on the bus and looking at me writing a poem, and him being like, saying something to the effect of, "Dude, you write poetry? What are you, a fag or something?"
A lot of the reasons that I've seen that people struggle with trans stuff is because they don't really know what their own gender is. Honestly, gender binaries, it sounds like feminists speak. It immediately, like, it cues for me that kind of like eye roll, which is interesting because I'm a feminist and then some.
Society's construct of, the stereotypical male and female and the gender roles connected to that.
Restriction.
And it's pretty much an imprint from society.
Most people don't fit into a very binary understanding of gender.
So what do you know about the gender binary?
Apparently nothing.
Not much, really. I haven't really heard of it. I can sort of use educated guesses to kind of understand what that means, but I don't really know.
There's all different parts of our identity, and each of us are made up of a number of things that exist on a spectrum separate from each other, right? And so there is our body and sort of the mechanics of what we've got in terms of our bodies based on chromosomes, based on hormones, based on our anatomy, right? And that exists on a spectrum. So there are folks that are assigned female at birth, there are folks that are intersex, and there are folks that are assigned male, right? And so that is about our biology. There is then also our gender identity, and so our kind of innermost sense of who we are and who we know ourselves to be, right? There are tons of gender identities out there. So people identify as transgender, people identify as gender queer, people identify as agender, as gender fluid, as man, as woman, as demi-girl, demi-boy, like lots and lots of gender identities that exist, right? And then again, that they exist on a continuum, sort of differing levels of masculinity or femininity or neither or both.
Hi. Could I get a chicken nugget Happy Meal?
Okay. Apple slices, yogurt.
Apple slices.
Toy for a boy, girl.
Why don't we do a girl toy?
What's a girl toy? A toy that girls play with? Dolls?
A doll. Maybe a unicorn.
Can you tell me something that is a boy toy? What's a toy that boys play with?
Video games. Maybe a tractor or something like whatever's in my dad's garage. Pocket knives? Maybe a truck.
Consider your early memories. Were you a little girl or a little boy? What effect did your gender have on what you could or couldn't do? At what point did your gender start affecting how you saw yourself? And if gender didn't have such an immense impact on childhood, would it change the things we view as normal?
I mean, we know that our gender identity is largely formed by the time we're 4 years old.
As a kid, when you're born, you don't have any concept of the world at all, like anything about society, anything about anything, because you're new. And then as you grow up, the things that you hear on TV and the things that you see around you and the things that your parents say, like jokingly or not, has an impact on you and like the way that your parents treat you individually. Like, I know my family a lot, they classify us as like, oh, the girls are gonna go do this, which on its own is just such a passive thing to say, but when you hear that your entire life, it kind of imprints certain things.
Like if you're having to check a box that says you're female prior to taking a test, you are actually more likely to do poorly than if you don't have to check that box in the beginning. And the different ways that we internalize like messages about gender and how those are linked to intelligence and academic performance. Even just on a binary level, that those things are messy. But if you fit outside of the binary, that means that you've just started a test and you're already invalidated. You already don't exist.
We're constantly told that you have to be this or that, and if you are this, then you have to act in these ways, and if you are that, then you have to act in these ways, and it's oppressive. I mean, it's really just, if that doesn't work for you, it's constant, and it's insistent, and it's persistent, and it comes from all angles at any point in any given day.
And that feels like crap. And it feels like crap the number of times that you have that experience, the number of times a teacher says his or her, like there, just say there, singular they, rad. It's the word of the year. It exists, we know how to use it, let's use it.
4 times more likely to skip school because they didn't feel safe compared to their heterosexual peers in the last 30 days. 6 more times more likely to have attempted suicide or thought about suicide in the last year compared to their heterosexual peers. More likely to use harder drugs, more likely to have experienced physical or sexual violence, like it just across the board. And I think that ultimately really paints a picture of people that are falling through the cracks and that aren't being held. There's a huge sense of isolation and a lack of belonging, and those are basic things that we all deserve.
I didn't come out to any students, so that was really hard because the pronoun game went way downhill really fast. Because I went to all my teachers and I told them use he, him, and they were like, that's cool, and they did that and they were fine with it, but alarmingly nobody picked up on it.
So just like the basic little things of inclusive language make people feel really seen. Even just having a teacher acknowledge that there is something other than he or she, that there is something other than boy or girl, is just it. And it's funny because something that little can make such a huge difference.
And having people have to sit based on teachers' perceptions of gender, and hearing that there are classes where students are told that they have to sit boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl as a classroom management technique. The deep level of sort of hurt and confusion that can cause people internally and externally is just it's not okay.
And it makes it that much harder for people who don't identify later to understand why that's happening.
I'm constantly mispronounced, and there's no way to be like stealth and genderqueer. There's no way to just be like, oh yeah, everyone just like reads me as genderqueer, because no one knows what the hell that is.
The school, I believe, when you get like the attendance sheet for a new class of kids, it tells you their last name, their first name, whatever grade they're in, probably whatever house they're in, and then their gender. It's either an M or an F.
Moving through the day-to-day with overt and less overt messages that who you are somehow needs to be fixed or is wrong or is less than, it's hard. It's really hard.
The school can't change anything about you until you change it through the system legally. So I couldn't be called by Vern or Vernon until I changed it legally, which means my email couldn't be changed. So if I was working on something in class that involved us having to share something on Google Docs, I'd have to tell people what my birth name was in order for them to send it to me. Just like something that's small, but then everyone at that table knows something I don't want them to.
In high school, it felt like it was gonna feel like shit forever. It felt like I was gonna be depressed forever. I didn't, and even worse, I didn't know who I would be if I wasn't depressed.
The stakes are people's lives, right? Like literally people's lives. People's emotional health, physical health, the disproportionate rate of self-harm, I mean, across all of these markers of mental health and well-being, like that's what's at stake.
And thinking about the ways that on a daily basis, like students, people, we're all just like putting up barriers so that those things don't crush us. And what a difference it makes every time somebody gets my pronouns right. It's ridiculous that a word, just one word, even just like correcting one word can mean so much, but it means so much.
The bottom line is that like we need to raise the level of awareness so that people can have a safe and celebratory experience in schools.
You don't have to get it. And that's the big thing, like you don't have to understand why someone would want to use they, them pronouns. You don't have to understand why somebody to you looks like a boy, but they're like, nope, not a boy. You don't have to get it in order to still honor the fact that that's their understanding of themselves. And to be able to have space and have the education to like honor that in students, particularly when you're like 14 years old, and what validates a 14-year-old in the society? Like nothing. Nothing is like, oh yeah, you have really interesting things to say and your thoughts and feelings are important, and it's like maybe it is just a phase, but like it's a really important phase to the person that you're going to become, and you do you, and way to go. Like those things don't exist. And the ways that we can just do it so subtly with language.
It's just the default that we split things up based on a binary gender, and it's limiting for all of us.
And I think that that's something that educators sometimes struggle with, and just people in general struggle with. I don't understand. I don't want to do it wrong, so I'm not going to do it at all.
So how do we as teachers, friends, peers, and leaders create a school community in which everyone can thrive regardless of gender identity or expression?
The laws in the state of Vermont say that essentially that perceived or actual gender identity and gender expression and sexual orientation are protected categories, right? And so we all get to go to school free from being harassed or discriminated based on who we are. In terms of trans identities that are binary, that schools are kind of starting to get. Okay, you have a trans woman who is rightfully wanting to use the women's bathroom. Okay, get it, we get it, that makes sense to us, right? But what about a gender fluid student or an agender student? Like, is there a gender liberated bathroom for folks to use? If so, is it within a reasonable walking distance so that folks can still have the same equal access that the rest of their students get to have, that the rest of their classmates get to have?
A lot of the time when we feel like we're doing something that's difficult for other people, we want to apologize for it. And so it can just be really hard on a basic level to say, like, hey, actually, like, my pronouns are they, them. Like, I get that they're kind of difficult and that you might not be used to it, but is there any chance that you can try? That's hard for me. That's hard for me, and let alone like 16-year-old Red wouldn't have been able to ask for that.
So what are we going to do? It doesn't take changing what you eat, how you dress, who your friends are, or where you live. It doesn't take changing your life to change lives. All it takes is opening your mind to a world in which binary gender isn't the only option. Make the world a better place and break the binary.